Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247.com. And we are joined by Steve Robertson of JeansPage.com, the Mississippi State site on the preeminent 24/7 Sports Network. Gentlemen, are we ready for some football? Texas back on the road, their fourth straight game away from Austin, Texas, headed to Starkville, Mississippi. Steve, kind enough to join us. Steve, give us a read on this Mississippi State football team. We saw them beat Arizona State, a team that Texas had all kinds of problems with in the college football playoff last year. Jeff Lebby looks like he's got the offense going. Give us your read on this team.
One thing I'll say before we get to that, the fact that Texas has not played a home SEC game this year is a problem with the schedule, right? And like you look at Mississippi State, like all of the road games are at least 7-hour trips for our fans. That's a problem. There's got to be a better way to do this. But secondly, to your question, yeah, Levy has had some good moments offensively, and I think the biggest story of this year compared to last year, we were there, Derek Arroyo last year, and Michael Van Buren got his first college start against one of the best teams in college football, but State simply could not get stops last year. And there were some games offense played well, some games not so much. But it really wasn't until November that this defense began to kind of take root. This year it's been much different. Now you bring in Paul Rhodes, obviously you bring in Mike McIntyre as analyst, and their influence is obviously being felt. But this is a defense that is considerably better than last year. Like last year, this time, everybody wanted to run Coleman Hutzel out of town on the rail. Nobody even mentions his name anymore except in a very positive light. So State, we feel like it's very close. We feel like obviously let one get away last week at Florida. They feel like they let one get away when Tennessee came here in overtime. But it's the maturation process, Chip. I mean, you're teaching guys how to win and close out games, and that's kind of where State finds itself.
Steve, I want to piggyback off what you said. Something there caught my attention. When we spoke with Jeff Lebby at SEC Media Days, he noted during his intro the addition of Paul Rhodes and someone I know very well from my time covering Florida International, Mike McIntyre. Just curious, could you, and typically you don't see analysts, provide a great impact, although I think Texas fans would say certainly Paul Christ, when he was here on the 40 acres, made an impact on the program. What have you seen from those guys? Because Mississippi State's defense, while, they're not lights out, certainly are much improved from last year.
Well, Rhodes has helped out with the secondary mostly. And, I think there's been a lot of moving pieces in the offseason, getting some guys in. And the secondary is playing really, really well. I mean, Kelly Jones is a guy. It's so interesting, Eric. When he was a high school recruit at Clarksdale High School, I saw him in camp, and I couldn't believe he's a freak, right? I mean, you see that length and you see that foot speed. So I called his head coach, Henry Johnson, and I said, does he have grades? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, how come he didn't have any Division I offers? He goes, your guess is as good as mine. So I start stumping for this kid to every college coach that I know. I said, there's a kid in the Mississippi Delta that is a freak of an athlete. But Kelly never played corner, so there was some kind of growing pains. But now you look at him now, he's one of the highest graded corners in the country, and he is a guy that'll take coaching. He is a guy that understands how life works. And I think Rhodes has been instrumental in that part, not to in any way undercut Corey Bell and the contributions he's made. But Rhodes, I think, has brought this secondary together. Mike, of course, working some with the backers and with some of the guys on the edge. And then you bring in Vincent Dancy, of course, that was in Colorado. He's a former head coach. David Turner now kind of working with defensive linemen with hands in the ground. I think even by putting more voices in the room, there has been a simplification of defense. And I think that is what is so evident. And I think when you've got experienced guys like Mack and Rhodes that know how defense is supposed to look, and both of those guys are synonymous with quality defense, you can only get better by adding their influence. And I think everybody, when they hired him in the offseason, people were thinking, well, this is like a de facto DC job in waiting. I don't think that was the intention. That may be what would have happened if things had went poorly. But this defense is considerably better than last year, and is keeping State in games and giving that offense a chance to win some games. It's incredible.
Chip, one quick follow-up. I'll pass it back to you. You know, I forgot Corey Bell also there, another former assistant at FIU. But kind of just wanted to piggyback again. You know that secondary with Kelly Jones, for Texas fans may not know, 6'4" cornerback, right? You know, very sizable guy there on the outside. I wonder if you could talk about two other guys, in Jerron Manning and, of course, the veteran there, and Isaac Smith, kind of what they bring to the secondary. Because, of course, Texas looking to rebound in the pass game after a struggling outing at Kentucky.
Yeah, Jerron Manning is probably, as the kids say, low-key the best portal transfer that State had, right? He's a guy that was a product of the Mississippi Junior College system. He played at Copiah Lincoln, and former State assistant Glenn Davis has been synonymous with that program. So when Manning goes in the portal and picks State, I picked up the phone and called Glenn Davis, and I said, hey, tell me what we got going on here. And he said, Steve, he was an SEC player last year. We just simply couldn't get because it was kind of a late deal with him. He ends up going out to Old Dominion, becomes their best safety, and then comes in here, and everybody just kind of quietly and maybe gleefully let that one fly under the radar. And then as you get into fall camp, people are like, he's going to be a day one starter. And you're like, well, wait a minute. He only was rated a couple stars out of high school, and he only had 3 stars out of the portals. How good can he be? You're beginning to see how good he can be. And really like him, a lot. But Isaac Smith's a guy that's been a little bit banged up. Wasn't quite 100% last week. We'll be closer to that this week. But Isaac Smith's an absolute freak. But people are like, well, he's making less tackles. Well, thank God for that. Everybody has to have a leading tackler, but he didn't have any help last year. And that's not to be disrespectful to anybody, but he was the bell cow on this defense. And I guarantee if you ask him, Eric, if he's happier making less tackles this year, he will tell you he is, because the team's playing more successful. But they were on the field so much last year, somebody had to make all the tackles. He got the SEC in tackles last year. So he's been a little bit banged up, but he's not having a bad year. He's a guy that loves it here at Mississippi State. Had multiple opportunities through the tampering aspect of the portal last year to leave, and elected to stay here. So it would be interesting to see what he does at the end of the year as far as the draft goes. But yeah, he's a monster. He plays the star. He's not, maybe a true one high safety guy. He's a guy that's going to basically play that star position, which is a bit of a hybrid, but he was built for that. And I don't know that he has the foot speed to play well over the top, and maybe not the girth to be a regular linebacker. So this defense kind of uses his skill set in a way that's advantageous to both he and the team.
Steve, Blake Shapen, Texas fans remember him from his time at Baylor. And how is he leading this team and running this offense? And then I'll follow up on the running back position.
Pardon me, but Blake is a guy that's made some strides this year, but there's still left room for improvement, right? Decision making at times has been a bit of an issue with him. He is a competitor sometimes, and I think discretion is a better part of valor. Sometimes he's a guy that just wants to let it rip and let his guy go make a play, and sometimes you need that. State's been really good outside the numbers. They will scheme you up to get that one-on-one matchup with either Brennan Thompson or Anthony Evans outside, kind of paired up with a corner. They'll do some things with some eye candy to kind of occupy the safety. And Blake's been really good in most of those situations. He's overthrown some, and that's the thing. Everybody talks about that last play at Florida. Well, there was a play in that second quarter where we had Brennan Thompson open on a post route that's going to score, because, as some would argue, he's the fastest guy in college football. And even with the one high safety, he's able to get over the top. And so the game was not won or lost on that last play. That's just what everybody remembers. State should have been up 2 scores at the half in this ball game. And I think some of that is because Blake misfired a little bit. Some of that, too, is people forget, even though Blake is a 6-year senior, he has not played a ton of football because he's been banged up and had some injuries. And so in the portal is always interesting, trying to find chemistry with your receivers. But Blake has been good, can be better.
In the running back position, Fluff Bothwell did not play against Florida, but Devon Booth goes for over 100 yards.
Yeah, and Booth was expected to be. He was kind of the heir apparent anyway. He benefited from the Diego Pavia ruling. We thought he was done, and I remember asking Jeff Levy toward down the end of the stretch. You finally got him going. Now you're losing him. He goes, "Man, I'd love to have one more year." Well, lo and behold, you get one more year, and they were already planning at that point to go out and get a big time back out of the portal. So you kind of got the best of both worlds with Booth returning and Bothwell coming in. Bothwell is a great story out of Oneida, Alabama. He was a guy that kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Goes to South Al and has a tremendous freshman year. He didn't play last week. We thought when he was on the field at Kyle Field and had to be carted away that he was done for the year. He is not. If he does play this week, which I don't expect, it'll be a rather limited role. He's still kind of coming back. The main thing is to have him ready for the stretch in November. But Booth has been really good. And Booth had some gains against Texas last year. But there's a young man, Xavier Gate, and they're really high on. Unfortunately, he had a big fumble in the red zone against Florida. But he might even be a little more explosive than those guys. It's just a matter of kind of getting him acclimated to the position. He was basically a safety and a Wildcat quarterback in high school. So he's learning to be a running back on the college level. You sign him on raw materials, and hopefully you can teach him the rest. But this running game has been it's been an improvement. A lot of that too is about the offensive line. I mean, they really dedicated some resources and scholarship spots to kind of shore up the offensive line. And while pass protection at times has been a bit of an issue, they have been able to run the football more times than not.
Steve, I'll kind of piggyback off of that and ask you a question that, in terms of the stat sheet might not stand out, but I think it's a bit of interest to Texas fans. Trio former Longhorns. You got Jere Bledsoe, Darren Gillette, and Brennan Thompson out there in Starkville. Just kind of, fill us in on how those guys have been doing, what impact they may play on Saturday, specifically Jere Bledsoe. I know had been in the starting lineup for Mississippi State. And Brennan Thompson as well. Let's talk about those guys.
Yeah, and what's interesting is all three of those guys have made contributions. They've all been a little beat up too. Brennan missed the second half of the Tennessee game, and that's the thing you go back and think about. You lose one of your most dynamic playmakers for the second half of that ball game, and it ends up being a one-score game. Jere is a guy early on that really flashed in camp, and I know he didn't have a ton of playing time at Texas, and neither did Gillette, but both of those guys are in the rotation. I think Jere may be a little bit ahead of Darian at this point, but I think all those guys, number one, have a great foundation of football, and then they come here in an opportunity where they're at positions of need, and so I think it's been a good fit for all three of those guys. But I think Jere is a guy whose best football still ahead of him.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, I'll be super quick, and I'm sure Chip will probably ask later on, kind of what Texas fans can expect heading to Starkville. As I know we talked about Steve off here, first time since 1991, but this is kind of, as Texas fans know, the tail end of a 41-day stretch away from Austin. Texas had the bye week, and then, of course, had the road game at Florida, Red River Shootout, then Kentucky, and now closing up at Starkville. Just talk about that atmosphere, maybe how fired up Mississippi State fans are to get Texas in town for the first time in 34 years.
Well, they've been a lot more fired up if they'd beaten Florida. Okay. And, everybody's like, they're disappointed because you don't get that Florida team that often, right? A chance to go on the road in one of the historic venues of college football and come out there with a dub. So it's a little angsty, I guess you could say. Now come Saturday, they'll be over that, right? But it's going to be really loud. I know you guys have been to Kyle Field in recent years, and all due respect to the Aggies, which is kind of a sister institution of this fine institution here, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not. And that's not me being disrespectful, but it gets really loud here. And I've been all over this conference. I've been to the Swamp. I've been to LSU at night. I've been on field level. I've covered in every venue except for Williams-Brice Stadium. And I can tell you, it doesn't get louder than anywhere like it does here. There have been times I've been at LSU when I felt like the ground was going to open up and swallow us whole. I mean, it's been a biblical quality noise. But when it gets rocking at Davis Wade Stadium, and especially when you're not used to it, I mean, it's like it's so cute, the people walk around in practice and, hey, we're going to put speakers up and have kids. No, you're not prepared until you get here. And I've got assistant coaches around the conference that have said that. It's like there's no way you can replicate it. There's no way you can fully prepare. So if Mississippi State fans are really excited about winning this game, and there used to be a guy, you guys might have heard of him. We used to call him Archie Who, and he's got a grandson that plays for you guys. So don't be surprised if you see some like Arch Who type things. That's just kind of tradition, but also too, it's, Peyton and Arch are like our favorite Mannings, right? Because they went to proper institutions, right? They went to great institutions of higher learning with great football tradition. So they're our favorite Mannings. But come Saturday, we would love to introduce a new Manning to Davis Wade Stadium. But if you've never experienced the Cowbells in person, and you're a fan, and I'm giving this as a caveat to your fans, it's better to have earplugs and not need them than to need them and not have them.
That's good stuff right there. Steve, if Mississippi State is going to win this game, how do they do it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've thought about this a lot over the course of the last 48 hours or so. Haven't had a chance to watch Texas and Kentucky. I listened to the fourth quarter and overtime of that game, and I tell people all the time, people don't get it. Going to Lexington at night is just weird. And that's not disrespectful. Like Mark Stoops just muddies things up. Like they negate the quarterback run. And I talked about that on my show last week. I said, Stoops is going to take Arch Manning's ability to influence the running game away, just the same way that he did Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. They muddy it up. They run those odd fronts. They'll run some bear stuff. They get in odd stems. And so if you've never experienced number one play in Kentucky, it's tough to do it in a week, even when they're down, right? But then you got to go up there, and the atmosphere is just different. It's just kind of odd. So I expected a close game, and I think that's what's got to happen for State this week. I don't think State's going to win a shootout, not against that Texas defense. I think maybe a game where the first 1 to 20 wins the game, and I think State, number one, has to win the turnover battle. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And when they get the opportunity to have a short field, you got to cash in. You can't kick field goals. You got to put the ball in the end zone. And again, State had every opportunity to knock Florida away on the road last week. And I think in some ways, rather than that becoming, a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think this week, just based on media interaction so far, I think they have grown up a little bit from the experience. And I think they want to avoid a close game if at all possible. But I think Texas would probably have to help them a little bit if State's going to get much separation in the game. I think it's going to be a very, very close game.
Steve, I kind of coupled two questions into one here to kind of finish up for me. One on the field and then one in relation to the atmosphere. Texas fans, if there's one thing they felt angsty about all year, it's been the play in the trenches, most notably on the offensive line. Talked about Dre Bledsoe earlier. I was wondering if you just talk about Mississippi State's defensive line. Obviously, we talked about the secondary a ton. We talked about the defensive line. And, kind of the off-the-field question for Texas fans who do make the trip. What are your recommendations? What can it get into in Starkville?
Well, the first thing that I would say, Mississippi State's biggest problem last year was defensive line. And they made a huge commitment to that group last year in the portal. Will Whitson obviously was a guy that was not maybe highly thought of by a lot of people. He was here, and we expected Will Whitson to do some big things. You lose him after 2 weeks, and he was starting to get some national accolades and things like that. And so we worried a lot about what the pass rush would look like without him. Calvin Dinkins is a guy that from Lake High School that was kind of a late bloomer, made himself as a senior. State actually had to beat Florida to get him right before signing day. And then we lose him in the season opener in back-to-back years. This is the first year 3, that he's been able to play an SEC game. And but he's a real load inside, and we like his potential long-term. So, yeah, it's not Texas A&M, and who I think may have the best front in college football. But it's a lot better than it was last year. And yet, even what you guys saw last year in Austin in the second half when Texas gets ready to just run the football, and in the game they were able to do so because State was hapless. And what's interesting about that game too, so I'll go down and call my wife every game at halftime to just because it's what you're supposed to do, right? And so I go out of the stadium to call her, and I get back on the elevator to go back up to the press level, And there's this little guy, this Texas fan, and he is just like wiping his brow. And I was like, dude, where is everybody going? This is a 1-score game. He's like, man, if we lose this game, I'm going to be so upset with these people that left. He said, this game is still a 1-score game. And then it's so funny. I get to my spot on press row, and I see the guy. And then there's the fumble to open the third quarter, right, when State forces a fumble there. I thought this guy was going to lose his mind. I thought he was going to have to be carted out of the stadium, So yeah, it was a good experience, the game withstanding. But yeah, back to the atmosphere here. Starkville's a college town. Starkville's basically a smaller version of College Station. It's a land grant school, and but the Cotton District is an area just off campus, just down University that turns into Main Street. I mean, there's a lot of great places there, and I hear Matthew McConaughey's already rented out a spot there. I hadn't confirmed that, but we're happy to have him in town, and happy to have all you guys in town. But I think the most important thing to know about Starkville is we don't do the national chain thing. Like, even when they have come in here, like we are a small town, but we're not small time, right? And we support each other. Every great restaurant in Starkville is a local restaurant. We don't have a Cracker Barrel here. They went to Columbus, just down the road. But it's a community that loves each other and loves this university. And before I moved here, I thought it was all about Mississippi State. And I'll be honest with you, if I had known how great the people of Starkville were on a day-to-day basis, I'd have moved up here much earlier in my life, just because, a lot of people come on game day, right? And so you get to see, when we're happy they're here, but when you're here Monday through Thursday and, your kids are going to school and playing ball with assistant coaches, kids, and, you learn about community. And, but yeah, this is a place that's fiercely proud to be Southern, but also to be stately. And, we're looking forward to having Texas back. And I don't know if Jackie Sherrill will be an honorary captain this weekend or whatever, but that's probably what I would do. But we're jacked. We're jacked to have the Longhorns here in town. It's kind of a cool thing with you guys joining the league, just because like we haven't done baseball in Austin, I believe, since the '83 baseball regional, NCAA regional. And so I'm excited to go back and do that. And when I do that, I will have covered Mississippi State baseball on all 16 SEC campuses. And so that's my personal bingo card. So I'm excited to do that.
How's the soul food restaurant that Mike Leach helped survive through COVID?
I don't know that she has a retail presence much anymore. They just do more catering. But it's funny you mentioned that. And because Mike never would. Like, Mike would never, ever, ever have said that, because he actually used to get offended. We used to talk about some of this stuff. And Mike was a friend, and I miss him. I really do. But he used to talk about these coaches that would just go do things, for PR purposes. And he did so many things that most people will never learn about, just to help people, because he was a good person himself. Like, people looked at him and thought he was like a cartoon character or something. And in some respects he was, right? But yeah, that story doesn't come out until after Mike. It's like he would never have made that public,
Yeah.
And there were people around the country, like there are people that, needed things, and he just took care of it, and never did it to put on his Instagram, never had the university issue a press release. And I think that's probably the Mike Leach that the world needed to know a little more of. But I think it worked out better that you see him as this, swing your sword guy that's always making little funny jokes on Twitter. And then you find out later there was a lot more depth to him. And I think that probably adds to his legacy a little bit.
Yeah. I loved Mike. And I was all about his lawsuit and, attempt to get the money that he was rightfully owed from Texas Tech. I mean, that whole Craig James, Adam James shenanigans frame job of an excuse to fire Mike at Texas Tech was ridiculous. But yeah, he's one of a kind. Only coach I've ever had a football discussion with, and it morphed into a conversation about the television show Silk Stockings and how the blonde represented this and the brunette on that show represented that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic.
You never know where he's going to go. That's the thing. Like, I've told this story that he used to call me late. Like once he found out I was a night owl, I think he would just get lonely or need somebody to talk to, and he'd call and it would always start with, "Hey, well, what are you hearing about this? What are you hearing about that?" And next thing I know, he's explaining like the navigation patterns of the Apache Indians through the Monongahela Pass, and just trying to explain how they use the stars, and they made maps and made landmarks. And I'm like, "Coach, how do you know all this stuff?" "Well, I'm a curious guy, and he's been all these places, and he would say, "Hey, you never want to go here, but when you go here, you got to do this." And people always laugh when I say, I'll quote Mike, and we were out in New Mexico, my wife and I, and if you ever get a chance to go, don't. But he said, "Hey, you need to go here. This place to eat in Santa Fe is just outstanding. I mean, it's just literally outstanding, So that was always Mike's big mark of approval, right? If anything was ever outstanding, whether it be nerd clusters or certain movies or whatever, that was always his big endorsement. The things that were literally outstanding, just absolutely outstanding. And so those are things I'm glad you brought him up. I don't get to talk about it as much these days, but eventually someday I'll write a biography of him. My current book, I say current, it's been out a year now, but a book called The Dude, which is a biography of Dudy Noble, has been on the Mississippi bestseller list for a full year, which is super cool. And so because of the success of that book, I said, you know what, let's just do a series of biographies, about notable Mississippi State sports figures. And of course, Coach will be one of those. So,
yeah. Well, I went to Key West last year for a wedding, and you go down and it's, I guess, the bar is like Captain Tony's.
mm-hmm.
And, there you go in there and they got chairs on the ceiling, for Ernest Hemingway, John F. Kennedy, and Mike Leach. And he just made such a profound impact wherever he went. I mean, he's only in Key West for, a couple of years, but profound impact. Good stuff. Steve, okay, you got a prediction for this game Saturday at 3:15 Central?
I don't think it's going to be popular with your listeners. I actually think State's going to win a close one. And I'll give you some reasoning behind that. Number one, as you mentioned, the never-ending vacation for the Longhorn football team, right? I mean, it's just been it's an anomaly in the schedule. And I'll be honest with you, no, I haven't heard Sark complain about it, but it's not fair to have these kids on the road weekend. I mean, at some point you got to go home, put your feet under mama's table, and let her take care of everything, right? And so I think that's a factor. I think also the fact that State has let Tennessee and Florida off the hook, I think that's part of the issue. And I think Jeff Lebby, number one, being a Sooner, will be up for this game. I think Zach Selmans probably walks down there and says, "Hey, you know what? This is one we got to have." But more importantly, Mississippi State needs 2 more wins to get bowl eligible. It's the first time since 2022. And I think this Texas offense leaves a lot to be desired. And I think that's probably been the big surprise for everybody this year. It's like, I guess Arch started against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State last year. And to be fair to him, and we've talked about this on my show, we're gifted with the gift of hindsight. But to expect this team to have been in preseason number one with a first-time starter, I don't think that was fair to him or to the Longhorns for that matter, right? There's just so much that goes into this and being a first-time starter, even with so many pieces back. Not to say Texas isn't great, they are. But preseason number one, I think, was probably unfair to Arch Manning because let's be honest. If his name is Arch Brown, right, people are going to be a lot more patient with him, right? But because of the family he comes from, and he's going to be great. He's going to be an NFL player. He's going to probably win championships at Texas. But you got to let him walk before he runs. And so we're no fans of the Manning family in this part of the country. But at the same time, too, I think some of what has been rested upon the shoulders of young Arch Manning have been expectations that nobody could ever meet. And but yeah, I think he'll do some great things there. But I think it's still probably a year away. And I hope it all starts next week. We just need Mississippi State to get a win this week. And I think because of the offensive struggles, I think State will stay in this ball game, and ultimately the cowbells and the crowd will put them over the hump in a close one.
Okay. Well, listen, I don't think anyone listening is totally shocked by that. But we really appreciate it, Steve. Good stuff. It's gonna be very interesting for sure. And appreciate the insight. Let's
and I told Eric off air before you came on, you get Mississippi State ice cream at halftime. And so it's better than that stuff they give you at College Station. It is. But you have to get Muscadine Ripple. That is a flavor that is unique to Mississippi State. Like when you see it, you wouldn't know it, right? But you owe it to yourself. They're little small cups like we got in the cafeteria as kids, right? Get Muscadine Ripple. If it's your first visit here, it's something that is unique to Mississippi and Mississippi State. I think it's something you'll have fun with.
Muscadine Ripple?
Muscadine Ripple. Yeah.
Muscadine Ripple.
A grape that is somewhat native to the area. So
okay. That's that. See, there's news you can use right there.
Absolutely.
Steve, great stuff. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Take care and safe travels.
All right. Appreciate it. All right. So, Eric, as we roll on here on the Flagship Podcast, we got to talk about what we heard on Monday from Steve Sarkisian and the players. Obviously, every single question seemed to be pointed toward the offense, which is totally unfair to what the Texas defense and special teams pulled off in Kentucky. It was a minor miracle. And if Steve Sarkisian thinks that he can count on that ever again, he is a fool. Because what they pulled off was basically climbing through a keyhole. But Eric, 179 yards of offense, 8 first downs, historically bad. The last time that happened at Texas, the offensive coordinator was fired the next day. Sean Watson, fired by Charlie Strong after a 38-3 loss at Notre Dame in 2015. But Steve Sarkisian, saying, hey, we'll make some adjustments. You think? Eric, your thoughts?
Well, Chip, you noted that the last time Texas had an offensive output that was that porous, the offensive coordinator was fired. I don't think I have to, tell Texas fans watching this why the offensive coordinator won't be fired this time around, because it is indeed Steve Sarkisian. I will come back to that in a moment.
Same reason Jerry Jones is still the GM of the Cowboys.
That's why Jerry Jones ain't fired himself, right? Chip, I actually am going to leave that to you because I would love your thoughts on that. I'm going to turn towards the question I asked Steve Sarkisian on Monday. I asked him, it's a question, quite frankly, I'd been wanting to ask him. When this offense has struggled this year, and there have been several moments, right? We'll take Ohio State out of it for a second. That's week 1. We know prior to last Saturday, you had the UTEP game, which was abysmal in terms of the pass game. This time, it was abysmal all the way around. When this offense has struggled, do you see those issues as short-term fixes that can be addressed during the week, or are those more long-term fixes that may have to be addressed over an extended period of time or the offseason? Steve said it's both, right? That's the answer he's supposed to say. Of course, he can't say, oh, well, it's long-term, right? Then you're just saying, hey, well,
we're screwed.
We're screwed. Can't be fixed this year, right? I'm going to address the short-term first. Steve said that, hey, the easiest way is when your team is struggling to do something, you take it out, right? You don't do those things. I'm sure Chip Brown might, and I don't want to speak for Chip Brown, my illustrious, esteemed co-host. However, I'm sure he might push back and say, well, did you take some of those things out last week in Kentucky in terms of pushing the ball downfield, right? I will leave Chip to address that. The first part of Steve's quote was, you take things out that aren't working. The long term, Steve said, is maybe you go back and say, hey, or excuse me, in addition to that, the short term, he said, if a position group is struggling, maybe you add you have a little more attention, try to help out a player who may be struggling there, right? Didn't name any names. I think you probably would point towards the offensive line first in that regard. Then in talking about long term, he said, hey, maybe you go in the offseason and you take a look at what is working for some teams, for some programs, trying to adopt some of those things into your program. Steve could not outright say, hey, we need to go into the transfer portal and go bring in, 3,000 offensive linemen and hold auditions and figure out how this is going to work, right? Of course, he couldn't come out and say that. But, and I don't like to psychoanalyze coaches' words, but I think you can read between the lines there and say, hey, yeah, some of this long-term will have to be taking a look at not just the offensive line, but maybe areas as a whole where you feel you can either bolster things or where you thought you had something, Chip, as we've heard Steve Sarkisian say during the season. Earlier in the season, some of this has been them, being the coaching staff, learning what they have in terms of the talent, just as much as it's been the talent learning how to play in the system, right? Maybe after a full season, you know what you have with said talent and say, hey, maybe we need to bolster this, add this, subtract this, who knows? However, and I'll pass it to you on this, Chip, as I opened with, the offensive coordinator is not resigning. He is not stepping down. He is not firing himself. So whatever fixes are going to be made in terms of this year, Steve Sarkisian believes that they can be made. Time will tell.
Yeah. I mean, I'm incredulous that he went away from the quick passing game that we saw against Oklahoma, that he wasn't busy trying to dress that passing game up in, with different motions, formations, personnel groupings. I mean, it was so obvious with the success that the team had offensively in the win over Oklahoma, that was the answer. And you and I talked about this last week. Like, there's no way he's going to go back to thinking that this offensive line can protect, especially against a Mark Stoops defense. And sure enough, he did. He thought they could protect. He thought they could. I don't know what he was doing with the running game, because there was no commitment to the running game in the first half of that football game. And you heard, you heard Steve say how, Mark Stoops is always going to take, if there's a mobile quarterback, he's going to take away the quarterback's ability to run. Arch had one decent run in the Kentucky game. So it just, that gives me the most concern, Eric, that is Steve Sarkisian so busy with everything else that he was duped? Is he getting bad information from, AJ Milwee and Mike Bamonte? Or are those guys not standing up and saying, Steve, we can't protect a 3, a 5, and a 7-step drop. We've got to have Arch either on the move or turning and throwing as soon as he gets the snap. I'm watching the Lions-Buccaneers game last night.
I wish I didn't.
Yeah, sorry about that. But the first throw, Goff throws it over to Gibbs. He runs for 20 yards. Like, there's nothing wrong with that whole behind the line of scrimmage passing game and getting the ball into your playmaker's hands. It's not sexy. It's not what Steve Sarkisian wants, but it's all they can do. Because if you go back and watch the film and go look at cut-ups, the all-22 of the Texas offensive line against Kentucky, it's embarrassing. Like, I felt sorry for Nick Brooks. Nick Brooks looks lost. Nick Brooks looks like he has no idea what's going on. Connor Robertson was bent over, half the game, trying to catch guys as they go by him. It was a disaster. And the fact that they weren't rolling Arch and doing everything they could to just wall off, one half of the field, it's just not awareness, Eric. And I don't have any faith in this Texas offense because I don't trust Steve Sarkisian to do the right thing after going away from it in the Kentucky game. Maybe they'll hear how bad they are all week long, and Steve will adjust the offense to get the ball out of Arch's hands, and they'll find some success, and the defense might get a rest this week after playing 40 minutes of a 60-minute game last week. And that's my concern, Eric. This stuff takes a toll. And Steve's right. This team got home at 4 a.m. from Kentucky. They didn't get any sleep. They got to turn around and start their week. They're off schedule. They're behind in their sleep. the whole week probably, and they've still got to go to school. They still got to do stuff. Now they got to get back on a plane. It's going to be loud as bleep when they get to, Davis Wade, and it is unlike anything. I don't know how they allow the cowbells. They're not supposed to allow the cowbells, but the cowbells are there. Like the SEC is just like, oh, it's Mississippi State. I don't know. I mean, you're not supposed to be able to bring in artificial noisemakers into a stadium, and that's exactly what those cowbells are. But it's a problem. And if you're tired and you're exhausted and you're trying to muster up the strength to play someone's Super Bowl, and Mississippi State's a better football team than they were a year ago, these are uneasy times, Eric, because you and I both know if they lose to Mississippi State, the sky is falling. And there's still games against Vanderbilt and Georgia and A&M out there. So I don't know. That was a long rambling answer to a question about the offense, but and just kind of the general state of things. I mean, Ryan Niblett can't do everything, Eric.
Chip, I want to play devil's advocate, and you said a lot there. So I'm going to try to, touch on a few of those things.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. It was all good. And I should say, before I even get into my point, apologies for last week's episode. Those who reached out and said my audio was a little rough. One day I'll take a picture of my home setup here that my lovely better half is set up for me. I have two mics. I have a mic here that you can see that I'm speaking into. There also is a mic that's on a webcam that is my camera. And I did not realize the webcam mic is what picked up. So I want to apologize for that because I sounded like I was in a pineapple under the sea. SpongeBob SquarePants. So apologies for that. Chip. Okay. I want to play devil's advocate to something you said in terms of the passing game. I'm going to come to that in a second. I think Steve, that was great stuff. Steve of Gene's page, Steve Robertson, he made a great point about the travel, right? I think we overlook it so much, right? And you have to remember, whether or not you want to say NIL and the transfer portal has made college football professional football, you can say that. However, the kids still have to go to class, right? It's not like they go to practice and they're done for the day. They still have to participate in academics to get a degree, right? So you're not just
do homework and study for tests.
You got to do homework. You got to study. You got to at least attempt to do it, right, Chip? That's not easy, even on the coaching staff, right? We heard Steve Sarkisian, Ethan Burke both mentioned it, but Steve Sarkisian said, hey, they got home at 4 o'clock, had me back at the facility, 8 a.m. Chip, at that point, Steve Sarkisian didn't say this, but from my time covering Group of 5 football with, the GAs and whatnot, you don't even go home. You just go find a suite in the stadium. You set up shop there, you sleep, you get a couple hours sleep, and you come back downstairs and you do it, right? Those things will take a toll on you. And to your point with the cowbells, I mean, you can try your best to get up for a game, right? And I know some fans will say this is what they're supposed to do, right? And that's true. That is what they're supposed to do. But after 40-something days away from home, at least not a home game, that's, Chip, where I think you're going to learn the true resolve of this team. If they get punched in the mouth first, right? Can they muster up the mental intensity to respond? Because it's been a long time since they've been home and the team's struggling, specifically on offense. But Chip, I'll pass it back to you on this. I said I was going to play devil's advocate. I had a current power for wide receivers coach, former offensive coordinator, reach out to me, as well as a former FBS head coach reach out to me when looking at the Texas game. And I asked them in specificity in terms of the quick passing game. And they said to me, Chip, that they agree that you have to do things out to help your quarterback, limit the 5-step and 7-step drops. But they also said there's one caveat. And I think this coaching perspective here is interesting. So I want your thought on that. You don't recruit Ryan Wingos and DeAndre Moores to throw it behind the line of scrimmage. And you don't, the head coach said to me, I didn't recruit receivers to run the option offense. Chip, I from a long-term solution, yeah, you don't do that. How can you sell it to those guys who came to play in an offense? And let's just call a spade, Chip. we're in a lot of short and intermediate passing, systems over the past 2 years that, hey, we're going to push it downfield and we're going to be aggressive. And then all of a sudden revert back to that. That's my devil's advocate take to what you said there, Chip.
Well, you tell him Kyle Flood totally misevaluated the offensive line recruiting, has failed to develop the 2, 3, 4-year guys that are on campus and shove them all aside for a true freshman who's clearly, being rushed into playing before he's ready. And you say, we're going to get it fixed in the offseason. We're going to go hit the portal for 5 offensive linemen. Just like we did on the defensive line a year ago. Look, Steve Sarkisian's got to bite down on his mouthpiece here and take some punches. And he's got to be a problem solver. He can't, be something that they're not. And there's no doubt he's got a quarterback who can push the ball down the field. He's got receivers who want to go down the field. But nothing's working except dumping it to the running backs and, tight end screens. I mean, it's a disaster, Eric. It is a flat disaster. What we saw at Kentucky last week was a disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. 179 yards of total offense. I mean, that is the worst performance, Steve Sarkisian, undoubtedly of his head coaching career. I haven't wasted my time and gone back through every game he coached at Washington, but it's a disaster. So fix it, because we're in game 7. We're past midseason. This is ridiculous. All right, or game 8. Where are we? I don't know. 5-2. Okay, game 8. So yeah. All right. I know we gotta get going towards take it or leave it. But Eric, one thing, we got to give some more love to this defense, because what we saw, and Colin Simmons, God bless him. I mean, the guy's playing out of his mind. He's got 5.5 sacks the last 2 games. And then in the post-game press conference, he stands up for the offense. It was very noble. But again, you cannot expect this defense to do what it did. Again, 88 plays. I mean, Anthony Hill's on the field 83 plays. You can't do this, and you're absolutely playing with fire. So it was fantastic what we saw. Michael Taff all over the field, the goal line stand. They had a huge 4th down stop, Anthony Hill, in the first quarter. They answer. I know they gave up a lot of yards between the 20s, but when they had to, and that's the PK style, bend between the 20s, don't break inside the 20. I mean, Texas got lucky as hell in that game because there were some real missed opportunities by Kentucky, but that was fantastic. Jack Boomeister, 8 punts, 6 down inside the 20, most of them down by Ryan Niblett. And then Niblett's, return game, he's number 2 in the country right now in punt returns, averaging 25.3 yards per punt return. He is a weapon. Everyone wants more Ryan Niblett, but Sark's got to figure out a way to where he's on the field for the offense, and it's not obvious he's getting the ball. So, Eric, I think there's those 2 phases of the game deserve so much credit for holding the season together for another week. I don't know how much longer they can do that, but that was good stuff. I mean, Trey Moore, there were a lot of big time plays. Hero Canoe forcing the fumble. Travis Shaw trying to dive on it. He kind of looked like an orca, trying to jump on a fumble. He hurt himself on the play. But yeah, this you're asking a lot. And this team's fighting. There's no doubt about it. So Steve Sarkisian deserves credit for that. He's almost better at building culture than he is running an offense right now, Eric. So kudos to Sarkisian for that. But this is this is going to be a real test of this team's ability and Steve Sarkisian's ability to let go of his ego and do what he has to do to win. You know, there's a former offensive coordinator. I'm rambling. There's a former offensive coordinator at Texas named Greg Davis who won the national championship in 2005. He didn't have a system. It wasn't like, we're running my system. He changed the offense to whatever was needed, whatever fit the personnel. When he had Vince Young and Sed Benson, he went zone read. When he had Colt McCoy and Jordan Shipley in a really not so good offensive line, they rolled the pocket. They did whatever they had to do to get Colt McCoy to throw the ball to Jordan Shipley. He just made it work. And that's what Steve Sarkisian has to do now. We know he's got the pro-style quarterback and the receivers going downfield and play action deep. This offensive line ain't doing that. So let's see what Steve Sarkisian can do. He did it against Oklahoma. Get out of your own head. Because now he's put his quarterback's back in his head. Arch Manning had a 1 of 9 stretch in the Kentucky game because he's getting rocked. He has no idea if his line is going to protect him or not. Just a disaster. But Eric, any closing thoughts from you before we get to take it or leave it?
2 quick closing thoughts. 1, a name that it's both of our faults for not mentioning, Mason Shipley, as far as being a hero as well, right? I mean, what an upgrade from last year in terms of Bert Auburn. Chip, you were there in Lexington. I mean, you talk about Jack Bomeister and Ryan Niblett saving the day. That guy saved the day as well for Texas.
And that 53-yarder was into the wind.
Wow.
So Mason Shipley.
There you go. And super quick, I just want to address this question because I think it's a good question from Eddie Farmer. Thanks for watching on Facebook. He says, why can't you put extra protection and still throw downfield? I'm going to answer this kind of in the most simple way. So, 11 personnel is your base offense, right? 1 tight end, 3 receivers. If you're going extra, that means you're typically taking a receiver off of there, right? Usually an extra tight end, 12 personnel, or another back in the backfield. We all know Texas very rarely is going to put 2 backs in the backfield. The reason you can't is you only got so many targets, right? If you're doing extra protection, that means in theory you're taking someone out of the route tree to protect. You don't have enough receivers. And especially, Chip, this week against Mississippi State, that runs that 3-3-5, 3-4 defense. You just don't have enough targets to do that, Eddie. So just want to quickly address that. But yeah, Chip, if you want to go ahead and send us take it or leave it, can jump right in.
All right, let's get to everybody's favorite part of the show. Little take it or leave it.
All right.
We got any scores? We got any updates?
Here's what we got. So I will lead off to you this week. Last week, Arch Manning throws for 2 touchdowns and runs for another at Kentucky. Take it or leave it. We're both losers, Chip, because we both took it. That certainly did not happen. Go ahead, Chip.
No, I said wrong. We were wrong.
The Longhorns hold Kentucky to 10 points or less. Take it or leave it. Well, you can do the sound again, Chip. Both lost that one. They did not. And Texas runs the ball for 150 sack adjusted yards. Take it or leave it. I had to disagree with Chip because Chip was confident that the Hordes put things together. So it's an 0-3 week for Chip. It's a 1-3 week for me. That at least brings me a little bit closer because I had a couple of rough weeks there. Chip is still in the lead by 1. So this week's take it or leave it. Texas scores at least 20 points Saturday at Mississippi State. Take it or leave it, Chip.
Oh boy. I'm going to take it. Not quite sure. Might be a defensive touchdown or a punt return in there, but I'll take it, Eric. What say you?
I still have Texas winning this game. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be much tighter than the, I believe, 7-point spread. But I get Chip. they got to get something fixed. They can't have another 17. I mean, they can, and Steve Sarkisian will bang his fist in the table and say we're 3-1 in the SEC. I mean, I can't say they can't. They can, right? But I mean, Chip, I wrote this in my story yesterday. The defenses are only getting harder, right, down the stretch.
Oh, yeah.
And they're facing offenses. First off, the run defenses specifically are getting harder. But the offenses, Vandy putting up points, Georgia putting up points. I'm ranting like Chip for a second, but they can't afford to expect the defense to hold these high-powered offenses that are coming week in and week out is too much. So that's me saying they got to get it fixed. So I'm going to take it, Chip.
Yeah, almost out of desperation. All right, Eric. Arch Manning throws for less than 200 yards at Mississippi State. Take it or leave it.
I am taking this, as you probably could tell from our interview with Steve. I'm very high on this defensive secondary. Like I mentioned, Corey Bell, former FIU defensive corner, former FIU cornerbacks coach with Mississippi State in the same role. Mike McIntyre, former FIU head coach in the role as an analyst. Two real smart defensive minds, two secondary guys, in addition to Paul Rhodes. That secondary is playing really well. Chip, Kelly Jones, 6'4", $195. I'm going to say that name again. That is a name you got to keep an eye on because Wingo, Livingston, Emmett Mosley, I mean, that guy is looking to play physical. And again, I just wrote a story, went up this morning on horns247.com talking about the play of Mississippi State secondary and how big and physical those guys are. Chip, I am taking this. He will throw for less than 200 yards at Mississippi State. What says you?
6'4" corner. Got zoinks. He is not. The last time he threw for 200 yards was against Florida. That was a loss. His passing numbers, Arch Manning's, are going down. He had 166 against OU, 132 against Kentucky. Yeah, I'm gonna take this. I bet he throws for 180.
To round us out, take it or leave it. Number 3, Colin Simmons, post at least 1 sack at Mississippi State. Take it or leave it, Chip.
I mean, I'm not gonna disrupt this role he's on. 5.5 sacks in the last 2 games. I will take this. Colin Simmons continues his sack streak and gets Blake Shapen to the ground. Eric, what say you?
Yeah, I'm taking this as well. You know, I think Colin Simmons is starting to do what Steve Sarkisian and company want him to do, which is just let his natural ability take over because there is so much God-given ability there with Colin Simmons. He doesn't have to force things. He can let the game come to himself. As I've said many times on the flagship, that dude is so athletic, especially in those early season games, 2 or 5 games. He should have just fell into a sack and a half, right? I think he's doing that now. I will take it, Chip.
All right, we'll have our predictions on the site in a couple days.
Couple days.
So tune in at horns247.com for all the coverage leading up to Texas at Mississippi State. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Steve Robertson for joining us from genespage.com, the Mississippi State site on the 24/7 network. And thanks to all of you for tuning into this episode of the Flagship Podcast. We will be back to recap it all Saturday night. So make sure you like and subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel so you don't miss a notification as to when Eric and I will be coming at you. All right. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and